I'm calling this continued meeting from the regular meeting in February. I'm calling this continued meeting to order. The first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Vernon Curtis. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that being said, I want to welcome everyone here tonight. I know most of you are here for the sidewalk issue, but I want to urge you to stay for the entire meeting. We will be discussing with our engineers the upgrades to the town's water and sewer treatment plants. Both are very vital to the town. So I do hope you'll stay with us and learn about some of the other things the town and board are wrestling with to make Franklin an even better place to live, play, and work. That being said, let me make it clear. There was never any intention to create any problems for the Bowery. We welcome the Bowery as a new neighbor, and the town's approach has been misrepresented and some misquotes from our last meeting. We want the issue buried, and we just want to move on and keep Franklin moving in the right direction. The first order of business tonight is the adoption of the February the 16th, 2015 proposed agenda. That's the agenda tonight. Do I hear a motion? Second. All in favor? Passes. The first item of business that we have is the license agreement for the Bowery Restaurant. Town Attorney John Henning will present this issue. And John, Counselor, if you will, sir.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would think by now you've all had a chance to become familiar with the latest and greatest version of the license agreement. Again, in short and sweet terms, is permissive use of part of the town property for the emergency exit used by the Bowery or whichever tenant going forward happened to be in that particular building. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about it, but just a simple approval will get it in place.
Any board members have a question?
I make a motion to approve it.
All in favor? Okay, motion passed. Now we have a presentation of the proposed Town of Franklin's capital improvement plan. Stephen Miller of McGill and Associates is going to give us the lowdown on it. This is information only. Welcome, gentlemen. Hi.
Presentation. Just wanted to let the board know I have another meeting that I'll have to excuse myself to in just a minute. It's not because I'm not interested about it yet.
Are we going to excuse him?
Yeah,
okay.
one time.
All right. You're excused. Please. Okay. Yes, sir. Glad to have you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Miller. I work for Martin McGill over in Asheville, North Carolina. The past several months, we've been working with town staff to develop a capital improvements plan for the town, specifically for water and sewer needs. Essentially, capital improvements are large projects that normally do not recur, but instead happen at one given moment in time. And what we essentially done is create a 10-year capital improvements plan to kind of see what's needed for the water program and the sewer program, and how that's going to impact the water and sewer fund that pays for those projects. So we've essentially been kind of looking at that over the past several months. So I'm going to kind of give you a rough summary is exactly more or less what we've been looking at. We more or less started with assisting the town with that capital improvements plan and developing financial strategies. In other words, once we've developed what type of costs and needs there are for the program, we've also determined what different ways they could possibly pay for these particular projects. We also determined the adequacy of existing revenues coming in from the water and sewer fund, to see how well that covers the operating costs and also those capital costs. One thing that distinguishes the two is that capital costs, in other words, within the capital improvements plan, usually are one-time events, large ticket items oftentimes. Operating costs are type of things that recur each and every year, like salaries and benefits, utility fees, and things of that nature. Once we took care of that, we also proposed new revenues that would maintain positive net income in the future. Now, essentially, the CIP, or the Capital Improvements Plan, was basically a list of one-time projects, and it basically comprised of 20 different projects that were planned for the next 10 years. The total cost of all those projects in that plan totaled about $15.1 million. Now, when you break that out between water projects and sewer projects, the water projects came up to being about $12.4 million, and the sewer projects were about $2.6 million. So you can kind of see how the water costs were kind of more had a larger representation in CIP than sewer. And we can kind of get an idea of why that's the case. I'll show you another slide here in a moment. There were also two additional projects that we had on that CIP that are not planned for the next 10 years, but they're planned much further down the road. And because of that, they didn't have an immediate impact on the financial status of the fund, because again, we were looking for only the next 10 years. And essentially, these projects in this CIP can be paid for with either cash, that's currently in a bank account for the town, or it can be paid for by issuing debt. In other words, going out to a bank, getting a loan, and simply making the debt payments on that loan instead of making the big lump sum payment. Sometimes that's more beneficial for the town because otherwise you have a very large cash outlay up front for a very expensive project. We had proposed that of the total $15.1 million in the CIP, that $14.1 million be paid for by issuing loans, and the remaining $1 million over the 10-year period paid for by cash that's available by the town fund, I should say, the water and sewer fund. Now again, there's several projects on the CIP, but just kind of give you an idea of what the most expensive or most costly projects are on that CIP. These top three are basically the water treatment plant upgrade and expansion, which is totaling a cost of almost $8 million, of which the first phase is $3.6 million, and the second phase is $4.3 million. The second most costly item on the CIP is basically a water line from Old Murphy Road, West Palmer Street. The first phase, that's going to be costing approximately $2.7 million. And then lastly, the third most expensive project is going to be sewer line from Sloan Road and Rolling Mill Road, which is expected to cost about $1 million. So again, even though there's approximately 20 different projects on the CIP, these are your largest ticket items of all the items there. We had proposed that for all the projects on that CIP, that we essentially proposed that the town water and sewer fund issue 4 different loans in order to pay for those projects. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, that the loans are projected to pay for the majority of those projects on the CIP and only have cash pay for about $1 million. So we're proposing that 4 different loans are issued in fiscal years 2017, 2018, 2020, and also 2025. And just for reference, we're currently in fiscal year 2015. So the first loan would be proposed to be issued about a couple of years. That actually is going to be taken care of with an interest-free loan that's issued through the state. And that's one thing that my colleague Keith Webb will be speaking about in a moment, is that that first particular debt is going to be an interest-free debt that the town was able to obtain. The other particular projects are proposed to be taken care of with loans that would have interest charges and having terms that vary from about 15 to 20 years. And then the financial plan basically took the capital improvement projects, there's 20 projects, also took a look at the operating costs that are being paid each and every year for water and sewer, and basically compared that to the revenues that are currently coming in from the water users and sewer users, paying their monthly charges for water and sewer usage. Basically, we projected the revenues and the expenditures for the water and sewer program over the next 10 years, and we also considered the CIP costs, the increases in operating costs, and basically system growth. And essentially, we had the objectives of maintaining positive net income. One thing that the state does not like to see for a water and sewer program is having net losses for more than 2 years straight. So it's important that the water and sewer fund actually makes a little bit of money at least each and every year so that they stay in good financial health, and also essentially stay on the good side of the state, because the state likes to monitor and make sure all water and sewer programs and other town and city departments stay in good financial health. Another objective was basically providing sufficient capital to implement the CIP, in other words, generating enough money to make those debt payments or to provide that cash in order to pay for those capital projects. And then lastly, preserving a fund balance. In other words, the water and sewer program has a little bit of money set to the side for emergency purposes, just basically to keep the fund in good shape, essentially as a contingency type of a account. And it's important to keep a certain amount of money in that so that if anything unforeseen were to happen, there's enough cash there to pay for any unexpected costs. And during our financial analysis, we basically looked at two different options for the water and sewer program. The first option we looked at was basically funding the entire CIP. In other words, all the different projects I showed you on the CIP, the 20 projects and those 3 largest ones that I mentioned, would be funded in that particular option. The second option we looked at was a lesser expensive option, where only $300,000 per year would be allocated for capital projects. Now, of course, that would not be enough to pay for the CIP, but that would allow some money to be set aside for capital needs for the water and sewer program. And just as a reference, $300,000 is the average of what the program has been paying for capital projects as an average for the past 5 years. The conclusions we basically came to as a result of the water and sewer analysis were that, first of all, the CIP should be considered in the budget process. Essentially, the CIP is a critical component to the water and sewer program, and when the budget is developed each and every year, the capital needs should be a critical part of developing that budget. Another item was that option 1 basically proactively addresses the needs of the program, but of course it requires more revenue because it pays for the entire CIP, whereas option 2 only pays for a partial amount of the CIP, only allocates $300,000 per year to capital projects. So in turn, it requires less revenue in order to fund that particular option that we looked at. However, one issue with option 2 would be any particular projects that cannot be paid for with that $300,000 may become worse projects or have more deterioration in the assets in the future. So if you have a capital need and you don't address it, you don't pay for it, that particular need may become worse in the future compared to what it is now. There's also could be a possible risk increasing of infrastructure issues that may not take place with the CIP being fully addressed. Also, the town should consider the issuance of debt, as I mentioned before. When you have very large, expensive projects that cost several $1 million, that may be too much money for the town to pay for in cash, and make more sense to pay for with issuing debt, considering interest rates being fairly low historically speaking, and considering how you'd have a moderate or a somewhat moderate loan payment instead of paying everything up front. That kind of helps smooth the overall financial picture for the fund over the next several years. And also by issuing debt, you essentially allow future customers in the program to kind of pay their share for the costs of the program and not basically hitting all the present customers with the cost up front. Essentially, water revenues and expenditures should also be closely monitored each and every year because economic conditions change. There may be information that we find out about next year that we don't know today. We may discover there's a line that's got a particular need for repair that we don't know about now that needs to be addressed. So it's important to know that Essentially, the water and sewer program is something that's always changing, and as a result, it needs to be revisited on a fairly regular basis. So you always have an up-to-date idea of what the needs are, not only for expenditures, but also for revenues. And with all that being said, I'd now like to open up to any questions anyone may happen to have.
Anybody from the board have any questions? Being none? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Very good presentation.
Thank you.
I hope everybody here sees that what we sometimes have to wrestle with and how much it costs to provide these services. So I will be honest with you, I won't keep anybody else. If you want to leave, feel free to do so. But really, I would like for you to see what this board wrestles with and what kind of situations we sometimes are faced with. Providing water, sewer, roads, police, fire, all these things are functions of town government. All right, sir. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Keith Webb with McGill Associates. I wanted to give the board an update of where we're at on the water project. If you all remember, last summer we presented a expansion of the water treatment plant, and we proposed a two-phased approach where phase one would do some upgrades to the plant to meet current and future state regulations, allow the plant, which is very old but keeps running sort of on a shoestring, to start upgrading it and give us a way to move forward in the future to expand that plant so that it lasts the town another 50 years. As a part of that, the board approved McGill Associates moving forward last year with an application to the state of North Carolina Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund. We presented that program to the state, and I'm pleased to tell you that in January, the state came back. They ranked all of the projects. There was about 120 projects, applications submitted, and the town of Franklin has been funded for phase one of the water treatment plant project. And as Stephen mentioned, they have offered to fund phase one to the town in the amount of $3,578,750 in loans, but at 0% interest. So that's very good news. Along with that, the state has proposed a schedule to the town. It's a fairly forgiving schedule. Their schedule is that we have to update the preliminary engineering report that was done, and included as a part of that, do an environmental review for those proposed improvements. We don't anticipate any problems with the environmental review because all of the improvements are being made onto the existing site. So there should be no environmental problems. The state requires that to be submitted to them by May the 1st. McGill intends to have that submitted to them by March 31st so we can speed the process up. Following that, we would anticipate them approving that environmental report and that engineering report no later than October 1st. We think probably by July the 1st, sometime in there, which would allow us to move forward with the design of the project and take competitive bids so that we could be under construction hopefully this time in March of 2016. We would ask that you all, as you move into the budgeting process, take that into consideration as part of your budget. I've presented to the manager a engineering agreement that she will bring to you all so we can move forward, but I just wanted to bring to you the good news that we've got this funding in place at 0% interest. It allows the town to move forward with the needed improvements to the water treatment plant to upgrade it. And these phase one improvements are designed such that the plant can be expanded as we further evaluate our needs at the plant of how much water we need to meet our 20, 30, 40-year growth. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Questions from the board?
Add these existing small plants in there. That allows us in the future to add an additional one should the demand increase, correct?
That's correct. And that's really phase two. In phase one, what we're doing is, if you remember, the state of North Carolina requires us to do pre-treatment of the water because we use a surface water. We either have to do pre-treatment or we have to do what they call off-stream storage, which is build a big holding pond that would hold 5 days capacity. We've decided, based on our evaluation, the best thing to do is to build the mechanical pre-treatment, and that will be designed, those improvements, for the future expansion to about 4 million gallons a day. We will get those in place and operating, and then run it with that pre-treatment facility to build the case to allow us to then use the package plants to replace the existing concrete plant that's there that's aged out. And the building to house those package plants, as we talked about, will have enough room if we get blessed with somebody that comes in and wants to use lots of water, and we're willing to sell them lots of water at a nice rate to balance their CIP, we can add another plant in the future.
What phase, we talked about the upgrade of the lab, the testing area, what phase would that be?
That's in this phase.
That's
We're
in
doing the
first
chemical,
phase.
we're doing the pre-treatment, the lab and operation facilities, and the chemical feed facilities in this phase.
And you said the construction would hopefully begin in March of...
We would have bids in hand by March, so construction could begin in about June of 2016.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, so, folks, I appreciate y'all staying and hearing what the town's doing. There's a lot goes into treating and making sure that we have an adequate water supply, and our water treatment plants are all up to date, and I really do appreciate it. So before we adjourn, I'd like to say that our March meeting will be next Monday night, and there will be a public comment section there. So if anybody's got anything they want to say, I'll be glad to have you. Or if you want an item on the agenda, you'll let us know. We'll see that it gets on the agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this continued meeting. Is there a second? All in favor? We stand adjourned.